coronavirus crisis. President Joe Biden updates the nation on the pandemic. From inflation to recession, why Republicans are raising the alarm about the U.S. economy. Museum closed, how China is casting a shadow over Hong Kong. And Vatican relations. Learn about the Holy See's new connection to the World Health Organization. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden updates the nation on the coronavirus pandemic, and he announces a month of action. The goal, to get more shots in arms. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. That month of action you referred to begins right now. Today at the White House, President Joe Biden urged Americans once again to get vaccinated and help others do the same.
President Joe Biden announces a new initiative to vaccinate more Americans by July 4th.
We're announcing a month-long effort to pull all the stops to free ourselves from this virus and get to 70% of adult Americans vaccinated.
Average daily vaccinations are way down, around 600,000 a day. In early April, the number stood at about 2 million per day. So now, new incentives to get sleeves rolled up in the run-up to Independence Day. The White House says faith leaders, businesses, and celebrities are also expected to participate in the nationwide month of action.
Vaccines will happen at barbershops, baseball games, and NASCAR races. Pharmacies will be open 24 hours on Fridays.
Also today here at the White House, infrastructure. President Joe Biden is meeting with the GOP's lead negotiator, West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito, to see if some sort of deal can finally be reached. The clock is ticking on the administration's June 7th deadline.
And the world's largest meat processing company is getting back online after a cyber attack. The White House said JBS received a ransom demand from a criminal organization likely based in Russia.
This attack is a reminder about the importance to private sector entities of hardening their cybersecurity and ensuring they take the necessary steps to prepare for this threat.
And again tonight, as you heard the president, his goal, have 70% of adult Americans with at least one shot in their arm by Independence Day. And as an incentive, some places, including YMCAs, hundreds of them, are offering free childcare to those who get vaccinated up until July 4th. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
On Capitol Hill, after President Biden released his latest $6 trillion budget proposal for the upcoming fiscal year, Republicans are sounding the alarm. They claim unless the administration reels in its spending plans, the threat of a recession is looming. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
With the stimulus cash flowing, the U.S. economy grew at a rapid pace of 6.4%. But Republicans warn that the U.S. economy cannot sustain the excessive spending of the Biden administration.
Now, everybody has to buy gas. How much is that up? 51%.
Republican Senator Rick Scott played a little "the price is wrong," displaying some of the increases for essential items in the last 12 months under the Biden administration.
If you're a poor family, your wages never go up as fast as inflation is going up. We have got to stop this reckless spending.
Republicans also pointed to the warning from Harvard economist Larry Summers, a top economic official in both the Clinton and Obama administrations. After Congress approved the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, Summers said, quote, "The scale of Biden's relief plan could set off inflationary pressures of a kind we have not seen in a generation." Now, with the president's proposed $6 trillion budget with investments in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and more, last night Heritage Foundation research fellow Joel Griffith said on EWTN News Nightly, long-term, President Biden's budget is going to involve dramatic tax increases, not just on the wealthy. Or,
alternatively, it would involve the Federal Reserve printing money to buy up government debt. And if that happens, you'll end up with longer-term inflation, which is a tax on all of us, rich and poor alike.
Democratic Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says lawmakers will continue to work on the president's agenda.
So as the president continues to discuss infrastructure legislation with Senate Republicans, our committees are going to hold hearings and continue their work on Build Back Better with or without the support of Republican senators.
According to the White House website, the president's plan will, quote, rebuild an economy where every American enjoys a fair return for their work. But at what cost, some say. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Catholics in the Mid-Atlantic U.S. will soon have the obligation once again to return to Sunday Mass. On the last weekend of this month, the two major archdioceses and 4 neighboring dioceses will lift the general dispensation, which excused Mass attendance for over a year due to coronavirus. A joint statement says local safety protocols will remain in place for Catholics returning to Sunday Eucharist. A museum in Hong Kong commemorating China's deadly crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square in 1989 has closed after only 3 days. A spokesman encourages Hong Kong citizens to mourn the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protests on Friday in other locations. Officials say the museum was closed following an investigation into licenses. The museum says it decided to close to protect the safety of its staff and visitors. According to an opinion piece, authorities in China are trying to eliminate Christianity and replace it with a communist version of the faith. Writing in today's Washington Times, Jianli Yang says in part, quote, the arrest and secret trial of 4 Chinese Christians for selling audio Bibles in December 2020 is the latest illustration of how serious the communist government of China is on stamping out Christianity. The piece also says China is printing a Bible with communist content, sometimes replacing scripture. Joining us now is Gordon Chang, author of both The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, always so great to see you. First off, what more do we know about the people on trial for selling the audio Bibles, and what exactly is their crime? What are they being charged with?
Well, clearly they're being charged with being a Christian, which now has become a crime in China. Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, has made it clear that he's going after all religions. And it's gone beyond Christianity. It's gone to Buddhism. Buddhism is considered to be a Chinese religion, but they are eliminating Buddhism as well. So this is across the board against all religions right now. And Christians, of course, are in the crosshairs because it's thought to be a foreign religion.
And Gordon, as we mentioned, there are also allegations that China actually created its own version of the Bible, complete with communist content replacing scripture. What's the reason behind that, and why is the CCP seemingly so threatened by Christianity?
I think they're threatened by Christianity because they realize that there's fervor among Christians. And that's something that they haven't seen among Communist Party members. So they're very concerned. You know, we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party, and it's become not a revolutionary organization, but it's just sort of become a bureaucratic one. And people don't really believe it. They belong because they think that it can advance themselves, and they really are very afraid of the faith. So, for instance, in a lot of churches, you see Xi Jinping's image instead of Jesus Christ. This is really important because it shows that they believe right now that you have to be an atheist in order to survive in China. And unfortunately, Christians are being persecuted across the board for everything.
Oh, very, very scary stuff. I want to shift gears a little bit here. Yesterday, we reported that China is changing its long-standing population control policies and will now have families have up to 3 children. This as the country faces a steep decline in birth rates. Let's talk a little bit more about that. How does that really change things? And what about those who are traumatized for wanting more children in the past?
Yes. Well, what's going on here is that China faces the steepest decline in history, demographic decline, in the absence of war or disease. China, which is now 1.41 billion, which, as they said, was the 2020, They'll probably be somewhere about 450 million, maybe 480 million by the turn of the century. In other words, they're going to lose about 1 billion people. And that has sent alarm bells through China. Now, this three-child policy, which was announced a couple days ago, isn't really going to work because people didn't want to have 2 children. That was the change from 2015 to 2016. They're not going to want to have a 3rd child. That's because of the propaganda over decades have convinced the Chinese not to have children. They can't change this on a dime. Right now, I think China's leaders don't know what to do, and they're worried that their country could fall apart because of this social engineering program of the 1-child policy, now 2-child, 3 children. The one thing, Tracy, that's important is they're not getting rid of the family planning commission mechanisms that control people. And that means the womb police will still be in operation.
Well, really quickly before we go, we have probably about a minute left. I want to get your thoughts on this. As you know, there are calls to look further into a possible leak at the Wuhan lab. Those calls are growing louder, but China is hitting back. Are you surprised, Gordon, and do you think we'll ever get to the bottom of it?
You know, I think we might get to the bottom of this, Tracy, because I think the Chinese people, they will tell us. I think that we are going to find more people who are whistleblowers. But clearly, Beijing has been doing its best for more than a year to prevent us from learning what's going on. But I think that eventually we will find out, and it will be a lab leak of the biological weapon, is my guess.
Oh, Gordon, we're going to leave it right there. Always great to be with you. Gordon Chang, author of both The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Thank you again, Gordon.
Thanks, Tracy.
The Palestinian observer to the United Nations, that is calling for a resolution to enforce Israel's compliance with the recent Gaza truce.
And the bad thing that some still saying that Israel have the right to defend itself. This is unacceptable. This is not a logic, because we are the people who need the protection. This is our right to defend ourselves according to the international law.
Our colleague Christian Peshkin of EWTN Germany spoke with the ambassador. Well, Israel has a new president.
להטות אוזן קשבת לכל עמדה ולכבד כל אדם.
Isaac Herzog will succeed Reuven Rivlin to serve a single 7-year term. He is the son of former Israeli President Chaim Herzog and is committing to bridges of agreement. Israel still awaits a governing parliamentary majority. While Canada is anguished at the discovery of unmarked graves at a former industrial school for Indigenous children.
Saying sorry for the tragedies of the past is not enough. It's not enough for the children who died, for the families, or for the survivors and communities.
The country is memorializing the remains of 215 children discovered last week in British Columbia. For several years, a government commission has been reviewing alleged abuses of cultural assimilation at these schools, often operated by the Catholic Church. A coronavirus lockdown enters a second week in Melbourne, Australia. Elsewhere in Victoria State, restrictions will ease. Separately, a libertarian group has lost its lawsuit against Australia's international travel ban. However, it may appeal to Australia's High Court. Coming up, new standards for the church. Learn more about the canon law updates. And Italian holiday. How the country is remembering those who died in war. As we reported yesterday, the Holy Father has unveiled sweeping reform of the book in canon law that covers sanctions related to clergy sexual abuse. Work on the revisions began more than a decade ago. They are considered the biggest change to canon law since the early 1980s. Joining us now is Father James Bradley, Assistant Professor of Canon Law at the Catholic University of America. Father Bradley, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. First off, tell us about the significance of the new laws and why was it necessary to make such sweeping changes to this part of church law?
Well, in modern times, there have been two codes of canon law for the Latin Church. The first was in 1917, and the second revised after the Second Vatican Council in 1983. And the 1983 code contains 7 books, and Book 6, as you said, is on the penal law of the Church. So a new version of this book inserted into the code represents a substantial change in the universal law. In fact, this is the first time that an entire book of the code has been replaced. So from an historical point of view, the new Book 6 is very significant indeed. Now, having said that, the content of the new law is also very important, and the revised legislation will, in Pope Francis's own words, provide a more agile, healthy, and corrective instrument in order to prevent greater evils and, most importantly, to help heal the wounds caused by human weakness.
And in your opinion, do you think these changes will help the church deal more effectively with the clergy abuse crisis?
Yes, I think they will. The revised legislation is broadly about the same subject, what we might call crime and punishment in the church. But I think what's key is the approach that's changed. And it's really quite striking. The law is about crimes, but it isn't really addressed to its perpetrators or to its victims. It's addressed to the church's pastors, to the bishops. And the Pope has recognized that in the past there's been great damage, even scandal, caused by a lack of understanding of the true relationship between charity and the application of law. And it seems to me that he wants to correct this, not so much by adopting a less charitable approach, but by rightly reframing penal law in particular as an act of charity, a fruit of good pastoral governance. The law and order in general, and penal law in particular, has a purpose, the good order of society, in this case, the society of the church, and the common good, which we would ultimately see as the salvation of souls. So this moves us away from a kind of false dichotomy between mercy and justice, between pastoral care and the application of law, and insists, and Pope Francis really insists quite strongly, that the church's pastors and bishops in particular have a duty to perform in their careful and thorough implementation of the law.
And what has been the reaction from church leaders as well as lay people?
Well, as I say, one of the key changes in all of this is a change of mindset. No longer can it be said that being relaxed about the implementation of penal law is a kindness or being more pastoral. It squarely puts responsibility for all of this at a local level with the bishops. So I think this whole reframing of the law adds a certain cachet to canon law. It means that law is no longer seen as an obstacle to pastoral governance, but a necessary and positive instrument of it. And I think that's the way in which this will be seen as time progresses, as something which, in a sense, reframes law and gives it a more positive force in the life of the church.
And Father, we have about a minute or so left, but I'm curious, what comes next, and when exactly do these new laws take effect?
Well, first of all, they have to come into effect. So they come into effect on the 8th of December, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and there's going to be questions and clarifications between now and then. But I think the most important thing that comes next is the implementation of the law. These laws are not going to be worth the paper they're written on if they're not taken up and implemented by the church's pastors. So there are a lot of opportunities here for good governance and for helping to heal the wounds of the past, but the work really begins when we start seeing these laws put into practice.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Father, for your analysis. We really appreciate it. Father James Bradley, Assistant Professor of Canon Law at the Catholic University of America. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
Up next, new connection. How the Vatican will take part in the World Health Organization. And heavenly prayer. What Pope Francis wants you to know about Jesus. Today is Italy's National Day and Republic Day. In Rome, the Italian Air Force performed a tricolor flyover. This year marks the 75th anniversary of its post-World War II democracy. President Sergio Mattarella laid a wreath at Italy's Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. While the U.S. Embassy to the Holy See says it is displaying a rainbow flag during June in honor of LGBT Pride Month. The U.S. Embassy to the Holy See posted an image yesterday with a message saying, in part, the embassy celebrates #Pride Month with the pride flag. Under the Trump administration, U.S. diplomatic outposts reportedly were prohibited from flying the rainbow flag from exterior flagpoles. The Holy See has become an official observer at the United Nations World Health Organization. The status was adopted on Monday after the WHO's 74th World Health Assembly. The Holy See also has representatives at an observer level at the United Nations offices in Geneva, Switzerland, and in Vienna, Austria. EWTN Newsroom correspondent Colm Flynn joins us now. Colm, great to see you. So tell us, what does the Holy See's non-member state observer mean?
Good evening, Tracy. Well, the Vatican has been involved with the World Health Organization in one way or another from the very beginning. In fact, Pope Pius XII spoke at the very first assembly when it met in Rome. That was in 1949. But this recognition of the Holy See as a non-member state observer will give the Vatican a stronger, more formal voice when it comes to discussing certain topics and issues at the World Health Organization. For example, the Vatican now has the right to participate in issues that are being debated. It can make interventions and be put on the list of speakers. But as it is still a non-member observer, that is still not a member of the United Nations, it does not have the right to vote or to put forward candidates. So it cannot vote, but it can perhaps now play a more strong influence on the vote of others.
And you mentioned the Vatican has already been involved in the World Health Organization before, but exactly what has the relationship been up until this point?
Well, Tracy, the World Health Organization, or WHO for short, is a United Nations department that specializes in health. The Vatican City is, of course, its own independent nation state, but it is not a member of the United Nations, as I mentioned. This status that has been granted to the Holy See was voted in on Monday at the World Health Assembly. Italy was the country that put forward the resolution to make the Holy See an observer, and it was passed by consensus, and 71 countries co-sponsored it. It's a recognition and acknowledgement of the role that the Church has played over the years in humanitarian and health, particularly more recently during this pandemic. Now, the Holy See press office said that the decision to grant the Holy See this status reflected the relationship that the Holy See has continuously maintained with this organization back as far as 1953. And they said that together, along with the family of other nations, they would work to address the global health challenges that afflict all of humanity.
And Colin, before I let you go, do we know what the Holy See will try to achieve with this new status?
Well, on the website of the Holy See mission at the United Nations in New York, they say that their mission is to, quote, advance freedom of religion and respect for the sanctity of all human life. That's from conception to natural death. And speaking about the Vatican's new status, Luigi Di Maio, Italy's Minister of Foreign Affairs, he said that he was convinced the Holy See will bring precious value to the World Health Organization and further strengthen the spirit of solidarity on a global level. He also said that the Vatican's formal presence will be a great inspiration for all member states. Tracy?
Okay, Colin, thank you so much for that report. Colm Flynn, EWTN Newsroom correspondent. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
And finally tonight, Pope Francis reminds the faithful that Jesus prays for each one of us.
Non dimentichiamo che quello che sostiene ognuno di noi nella vita è la preghiera di Gesù.
At the Holy Father's weekly talk, he said, we must have great certainty Christ prays on our behalf before God our Father. Pope Francis said, we must never cease to trust in him, and added, in the moment of trial, in the moment of sin, Jesus is praying for me with so much love. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.